Okay, we're live, and I'm Janet Carlin's in the audience. I'm going to bring her over.
Okay, great. Welcome, everybody. You've joined the Newcastle City Council on a public hearing concerning ordinance number 532. It's an ordinance to amend sections 141-6 and 141-19 of the city code relating to vacant and dangerous buildings. It's introduced by Councilperson Leary. I'm going to give a roll call here, and then we'll open it up for public comments. I'm Linda Ratchford, City Council President. Joining me, we have the Mayor Mike Caranta. We have council members Valerie Leary, Michael Platt, Suzanne Souter, and Russell Smith. We also have our city treasurer, Janet Carlin, our city administrator, Bill Barthel, our city solicitor, Dan Lasco, our council secretary, Ken Bergmuller, and also our stenographer, Kathy Wierick. So at this point, I'm going to open it up to the public. We will have the public hearing, and when we finish this public hearing, then we will go into a meeting which will include a vote on the ordinance, which we have discussed for several meetings. So I think at this point we have vetted many of the issues, but we're really hoping to hear from the public this evening. So are there any people that would like to make comments? If you could raise your hand, and Ms. Bergmuller will let you in.
There are only 2 attendees, so.
Yep. There's only 2, and no one has their hand raised at this point.
Okay. So at this point, I had one question that I thought we could, since we have some time in the public hearing, and that had to it's regarding when you're actually in the process of if the work is discontinued for more than 20 consecutive days. And is that maybe Mr. Lasco, our city solicitor, if you could explain what that might be, a situation of whether this is a boarded up building and basically, you know, they should be working on making it not boarded up. They don't have to completely finish the work, but they should make sure that it's restored to the outside. And there's a 20-day rule, if you could elaborate some on that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's Dan Lasco. So what we're talking about is a situation where we have a boarded up property. They received certified notice to repair the building and restore it in full compliance with the code, remove the boarding within 90 days of request. Now, if 90 days is insufficient, they have the ability to appeal to the building official for an extension of up to 9 months. So in that context, where somebody has gotten that extension of up to 9 months, they have to provide a description of the work that's going to be done. They must maintain building permits. And we added the provision saying that if the work is discontinued for more than 20 days, the building official may, under those circumstances, send written notice revoking the extension that was granted. So the idea is that if you're stalling, you've gotten the 45 days, you've asked for an extension, we've given you the extension, and now you're not actively proceeding to deal with it, and the building official is seeing that there's no activity at the site for more than 20 consecutive days, then he can, if he thinks it's an abusive situation, he can revoke the extension. So that's what this is about.
And so this is Council President. This is in terms of having it as it may. So if there's some reason that the contractor can't show up or whatever, I guess there's some discretion on the building officials.
Yes,
part.
it's a permissive, the word may is used, not shall or will. So first of all, you know, there's going to be days where a contractor can't work. Maybe it's raining, maybe it's snowing, whatever. So we're not talking about, you know, they've missed a couple of days. We're talking about 20 full consecutive days where nothing is happening. So it's not a weather event. It's not something like that. Let's say it's a labor shortage or a material shortage crisis. They can always tell the building official, hey, this is what I'm up against. I'm waiting for my roofing material, whatever it is. and the building official doesn't have to revoke the extension. But there should be a good reason why there's not continuous activity to take care of business here.
Perhaps their supplies were on the Ever Given and it got stuck and now it's on its way.
Madam President,
Yes, Mayor?
I thought I understood this, but now I'm not so sure I understood it. So, Mr. Lasko, give me the order in which the clock runs again. So, there's a property that, someone in the neighborhood calls in, or one of us happens to drive by, or Mr. Cassell sees and brings it to our attention. When does the clock start? For how long? What has to happen during that time period? I understood the appeal process to the building instructor and the permissive nature of his discretion, and all the reasons why that could be happening. But what's the first time period? I want to make sure I'm clear on that.
Before anything happens, before any deadlines roll, the building official has to send a certified mail notice to the owner that he's got this problem with the boarded up property. That starts the clock running on them. Once they've got that, they've got 90 days to repair. If within the 90 days, they can request the extension. If they don't request the extension, a fine of $500 per day starts accruing. If they get the extension and they're proceeding with work, but then they stop for more than 20 consecutive days, the building official has the discretion to revoke the extension, which would re-implement the fining system.
Okay, and the fines would go indefinitely, or would the property be headed to foreclosure?
Well, there's going to come a point in time where Mr. Barthel says, hey, these daily fines are up to several $1,000s. It's time to take this one to a munitions sale. And so, yes, they would be continuing. The idea is this is coercive. Nobody wants to collect these kind of fines from them. What we want them to do is to fix their boarded building. And that was the impetus behind that, to create that kind of a daily penalty. The longer you let it drag, the worse it's going to get for you. But at some point, the city is going to say, this person's doing nothing. We need to take aggressive steps to collect and get this property back in circulation. And it would be done by sheriff's sale.
All right, one last question, if I could. So on the certified letter piece, does that mean it simply has to be certified that it went, or we have to have a receipt that they received it? Because sometimes it's difficult to track down owners.
Okay, on that point, yes, we thought about that. The notice has to go to the owner at his last known address as shown on the tax records of Newcastle County. Okay, that's number one. When you send a certified mail notice, typically you do get a return receipt. But the measuring point here is from the date of posting. It's not from the date of receipt. Because as you point out, there are people with inaccurate addresses on the county's tax records, and we have no way to track them down. We're dealing with that with the particular munition property we're working on right now. We sent our certified mail notice off to them at the county tax record address, and that person doesn't live there anymore. So they never got the notice. In fact, they live now at the Newcastle property, and when they got the posting from the sheriff that I'm foreclosing on their property, I got a call and they made their payment.
Okay, very good, thank you.
And just if you also review not all vacant properties have been boarded.
That's correct.
So,
A vacant property is, most boarded properties are vacant,
right,
but not
yeah,
all vacant properties are boarded,
right.
right? It's infrequent where somebody is living in a property that is boarded unless they're a vagrant or something like that. But the vacant property is a kind of a separate section to this. And this is in section 141.19, where we start talking about vacant property registration fees. If you'd like me to, I can go through the mechanism there that's being used. But the point is that you can have a vacant property that's fully up to code and not boarded. The lawn's being maintained, the property exterior is being maintained, but it's simply vacant. And they are expected to register their property if it's vacant for more than 45 days. There are some exceptions to that. People on seasonal vacations, illness, military deployment, sabbatical, compassionate leave, or other reasons not to exceed 2 years. But ultimately, if you have a vacant property, they're supposed to register it. During the first year of registration, no fee is due whatsoever. But if we go beyond 1 year, this is when the vacant property registration fees kick in. In years 2 and 3, the fee is $1,000 per year. For each year after that, it's $3,000 per year. And I would suspect that if those fees are not being paid, I'm going to hear from Mr. Barthel again that it's time to move on this property and take it to sheriff's sale.
And again, this doesn't, I know one of our residents had an issue. In fact, they just moved back to their repaired home on West 5th, and they are now selling their home on East 4th that they're not living in. It's vacant. It is currently for sale. I don't think it'll be for sale for long. But we're also removing so the same almost applies here, even though they have the house for sale. We're removing that the caveat that if the house is for sale, they don't have to register it.
Yeah,
But again,
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No,
What we
go
had
ahead.
seen, what we had seen in the past was that there had been a sort of a loophole in the prior ordinance, the existing ordinance, that said if you had your property listed for sale, you weren't subject to registration or registration fees. And we had, I know, at least 1 or 2 situations that I was involved in where the owner would periodically put his property on the market, listed for sale with absolutely no intention of selling it. And then he would, once the heat died down, so to speak, he would pull it off the market because, again, he had no intention of selling it. If Mr. Bergstrom mentioned to him that he needed to register, he'd just put it on the market again for a few weeks until the heat died down and remove it. So that abusive situation of getting a pass merely because you've got your property listed is been removed from this whole thing. So that doesn't mean that, you know, fees are going to apply to somebody immediately. First of all, if you've got your house on the market, you don't have to, and it's vacant, it doesn't need to be registered for 45 days of vacancy, and you may well sell it within that period. If you don't, you just register it. There's no fee for the first year. So in most cases, unless we're really dealing with a very depressed economy or unreasonable pricing, that property is going to sell within a year. And we're not going to have a situation where somebody in a hardship case is paying fines.
Thank you.
I have a question also, going back to Mr. Carranza's question about when the clock starts. As I understand it, part of this ordinance also requires people who, when they register a vacant property, to give an up-to-date mailing address and to keep us informed of their mailing address. So
Right.
if we send a certified letter to the last address we were given and they're not there anymore, that's on them because they were supposed to keep us appraised of their moves. Is that correct?
Well, you're kind of talking about apples and oranges here. That prior discussion about certified mail letters refers to advising somebody with a boarded property that they need to do repairs. What you're referring to here now is registering a vacant property that's not necessarily boarded. So yes, when they come and register that vacant property, we absolutely want them to give us current address because we know they're not living there. And we need to know where we're going to be sending that invoice for the vacant property registration fee. So the boarded up properties tend to come up in cases like where you have a fire loss or where there's been a chronically vacant property where the city has had to interject itself and board the property up itself.
And I have another question. In section 4, let's see, 4B, number 2, when they register the vacant property and they give us the name and address of the owner, and it says if the owner is not in state, then they have to give us a name of a person in the state. And I was wondering, I mean, I could see somebody having, you know, given where we're located, a brother in Elkton or a friend in Pennsville who'd be willing to look after their property, but that's not in state, even though people in those locations would be closer than, say, somebody in Laurel. Is the reason we specify in-state because if we have to provide legal service, it's easy, service of something, it's easier to do that within state than to cross state lines?
It is. It is possible to sue somebody across state lines via what's called a long arm statute, but it's an extra step that we'd have to go through. And sometimes that can be difficult too if we don't know where they are there, so much easier to serve somebody with notice or summons and complaint if they're in state.
I thought that might be the case, but wanted to check. Thank you.
Madam President, I have one other question, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
So Mr. Lasko, I want to make sure, I'm going to give you an example. This seems, and I went through it, and I'm looking at it again, and I may have missed it. This is laid out well, but I may not understand. I may have not picked up the nuance. So I think it sounds like this contemplates a lot of work around the structure, right? The structure of a building. Now, I look back and we all have, stories to tell from 2008, 9, 10 during the mortgage meltdown. And there were a lot of communities that were saddled with properties that were vacant. And there were, the structure itself was okay, but the property owner, they were owned by the bank, but they were vacant. They were vacated, okay? But the municipalities were stuck maintaining the grass, shoveling the snow, doing yard maintenance, et cetera, et cetera. Is there a different provision of the code that allows the city to take on that responsibility through a contractor or whatever, however it chooses to do it? Because if that happens to a property adjacent to mine, it's one thing to have a body of law dealing with the structure, but it's a whole nother matter to deal with the maintenance. And at what point can the city step in? I want just somebody to cut the grass. I want somebody to, manage this so it doesn't look terrible, because you will have public health issues with small animals, et cetera, et cetera. So is that not contemplated here? Is that found in a different section of code? And if it's not, would this be the right place to manage that?
A different code section. It's chapter 140 is the Housing and Property Maintenance Code that deals with issues like tall grass, trash left in the yard, things of that nature. And I know Mr. Casales are very active on patrolling the city, responding to complaints about the kinds of things you're mentioning. People are given a notice in that case, or the owners are given a notice to correct the problem. If they don't do it promptly, the city can come out and do it for them. And the cost of that is leaned against the property.
Very good, thank you.
Just to elaborate on that a little bit, I mean, it's not uncommon that when we have one of these derelict properties that, they may have vacant registration fees, they may have overdue taxes. It's almost every time. We also have code violation fines for things like tall grass and trash that turn into what are called excessive consumption of inspections fines. And all these things, where the building inspector has to keep returning to the property day after day to make certain whether or not the owner has corrected the tall grass or the trash problem. And those things generate additional fines, all of which are liens on the property and get tossed into the munition mix when I have to go after a property that way. So this chapter is really dealing with two issues. The first one is the boarded up buildings and how do we get those corrected? How do we coerce compliance with that to bring them back up to code and make them valuable aspects of the city again? And number two, how do we keep track of vacant properties? And how do we, again, use the registration system for, again, coercing proper use of the property, putting it into use, whether it's a residential or a commercial property, so that it's, again, a vibrant part of the city.
I'm going to open it back up for the public. Are there any questions or comments on this specific ordinance by the public?
I don't
Okay,
see any hand. Oh, I do. Mr. Gross.
okay, Mr. Gross, you have a question or comment on this ordinance?
Good evening, council. The one thing that I do want you to make sure that uh, there's lots of things that can be done, but that it's not used as a revenue stream and it's not used as a whipping post. That if code enforcement and the city administration is up on things, then there should be only a few instances where there's blatant disregard for the city. So I guess, like it's been said before, that you guys will try and work with people, but all I ask is that you don't turn people away that genuinely want to be a part of the community. And it's just made so difficult because of iron fist changes made to ordinances. That's all. Just be fair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If there are no other comments, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn the public hearing, and then we'll go into the special meeting.
So moved.
Second it.
Okay, and all those favor indicate by saying aye.
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 We are adjourned. And Ms. Burglar, we're just going to keep recording and go into the special meeting.
Yes.
Okay. Then we're going to start the special meeting for this evening, Tuesday, March 30th. Joining me are council members Suzanne Souter, Valerie Leary, Russell Smith, Michael Platt, and Mayor Mike Carana. I'm Linda Retcher, the council president. Also, we have our city treasurer, Janet Carlin, our city administrator, Bill Barthel, our city solicitor, Dan Lasco, our council secretary, Kim Bergmuller, and our stenographer, Kathy Weirick. Thanks for joining us this evening. We have two agenda topics. One, we have a resolution regarding an encroachment, which will be the first topic. And we just had the public hearing on the ordinance. Are there any comments on the resolution on the, any public comments first, and then we'll go into motion discussion? That would be on the resolution approving the continuance of an encroachment on the city right away, which is something we do very commonly for properties all over the city. So there are no public comments on that. We're going to, I'll ask.
I'm sorry, Mr. Gross has his hand raised. I'm not sure if he's for this or if it's from the last time. Oh, okay, never mind. He put it down.
Okay, all right. At this point, I need a motion to read resolution 2021-13.
So moved.
A second. Okay, second, Ms. Souter. Okay. This is a resolution approving the continuance of an encroachment into the city right-of-ways of East 2nd Street and Plum Alley for property located at 137 East 2nd Street. Whereas Frederick A. Dressler and Julie A. Lyric have applied to the city of Newcastle for authorization to continue encroachments consisting of a porch along East 2nd Street and the side of the residence along Plum Alley via the property located at 137 East 2nd Street, known as tax parcel number 21-015.00-139. And where it is the city's understanding that currently the structure of the front porch of the house encroaches into the existing right-of-way of East 2nd Street by a depth of 4.4 plus or minus feet, and the side of the dwelling encroaches into the existing right-of-way of Plum Alley by a depth of 0.4 plus or minus feet, as shown on the improvement location plan completed by AES surveyors dated March 27, 2008, and attached to this resolution as Exhibit A. And whereas the Historic Area Commission has previously approved a reconstruction and addition project, which allowed the porch and dwelling to continue to encroach on the right-of-way of East 2nd Street and Plum Alley. And whereas it is the city's understanding that the building previously encroached into the right-of-ways of East 2nd Street and Plum Alley for many years without the knowledge of the city. And whereas the applicant has agreed to waive any damages arising from the removal of the entire encroaching portion of the structure, including the dwelling and porch required for the use and maintenance of the right-of-way by the city. Now therefore be it resolved that the application of Frederick A. Dressler and Judy A. Lyric to continue the above described encroachments of a porch and dwelling house at property located at 137 East 2nd Street, known as parcel number 21-015.00-139 is approved, subject to due execution recording of a license agreement in form acceptable to the city administrator and city solicitor. And it is further resolved that the city administrator is authorized to execute and record such license agreement with recording fees paid for by the property owners. At this point, I'm going to ask for any comments from Mr. Barthel or Mr. Lasco about the process and the application here.
Dan, you want to just comment on it, per our
Um,
conversation earlier today?
Yep, sure. I did review the improvement location plan that was submitted by the applicant. It shows the porch as depicted here in the resolution, 4.4 feet into the East Second Street right of way. And the length of the building encroaches on Plum Alley by 0.4 feet, which is, roughly 5 inches. And obviously that's been there for many, many, many years. So it's been the practice of the city in the past, at least in my tenure here, where when we have routinely granted these types of minor encroachments onto the city right of way, but we don't do it by an easement agreement, which is a permanent property interest. Rather, it's by license agreement. And I've developed a form of license agreement that grants the owner, legitimizes the encroachments for the benefit of the owner, so that if they go to sell or refinance their property, these encroachments won't be problems for them. The license is assignable from owner to owner to owner as they sell again and again and again, but it does include warnings to the owner that if the city needs to access that right of way for purposes of, could be utility maintenance, it could be repairs to sidewalks, it could be expansion of roads, it could be a variety of things. If we have to access that any damage to the property is the owner's responsibility. They hold us harmless as to those things. It also has them agree to maintain these improvements that encroach on the right of way in compliance with all applicable codes so that they don't become a nuisance or a danger to the public that travels on the right of way. And if they breach those agreements, the license is theoretically a terminable type of event if they don't cure them after a notice. So that's why it's done via license rather than a permanent easement interest that can't be controlled. That's the nature of the license. We've done this on probably a half dozen different properties that I'm aware of in the past 10 years. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Lasco? This is very common.
Madam President.
Mayor has a question.
So actually, I'm just kind of curious. I was struck by the comment that you made and yes, these are rather common, but I remember or I recall a comment you made saying that, but if the city needed to make an improvement or take on some work, that they reserve the right to use the right of way that they rightfully own. Mr. Barthel, I don't know if you know the answer to this, but is any of the proposed work that Delmarva is talking about and different phases of their gas line work? I think I recall one of the phases having Second Street. I just think it'd be wise to maybe flag this for the owners if Delmarva is coming in there. I don't know if there would be anything remotely important about their work and whether it would impact where this is even located on the structure. I just wanted to raise the question or mention the topic.
Well, if you're asking me if I'm aware of any issues in regard to their next phase concerning what we're talking about now, I'm not. As far as whether or not you suggesting kind of two things, you're also suggesting that we should possibly look into this as a consideration, which of course we certainly can do.
I think, and I don't know if the property owners who I know, and I think are good neighbors, and I applaud them for doing the right thing. I think, don't know if they're with us tonight, but I just want to raise to their level of awareness the comment that Mr. Lasco made, because if there is work, there could be work scheduled for this part of Second Street, and it could a long shot, but it could, funnier things have happened. It could have a potential impact on their property. I don't know.
Mr. Mayor, if I could chime in as well. Without a license agreement, what we've got is essentially the owner encroaching on city property. So that if there were some type of an impact from Delmarva's work, it would still be the owner's problem. They're on the city's property, period. It's just like you can't build a shed on your neighbor's property, and if he needs to dig up a sewer line underneath that shed, it's tough luck for you if he has to move the shed or damage the shed in the process. You are basically the trespasser. And that's the negative aspect of this. One of the good things this does for the owner is that it gives them a license right to leave the porch and the dwelling in that encroaching position, so that when they go to sell the property, this won't be a title objection for them.
No, I support the resolution. I just wanted to just ask for a piece of clarification, given that there might be some rather heavy infrastructure work in the area, and that it could impact their property. I don't know. I just wanted to raise that and flag it for everybody. Thank you.
So let me speak on that. Part of my property is also on city property. Probably about a third of the screened-in porch is on city property. It's just, you could just draw a straight line and go from there against the flat wall of the brick and all the way down. I would hate to think that if they come in to, I don't think they'll put the gas meter there, but if they tried to put the gas meter there or needed to put it there or put it under or something, and they tear up the veranda, they tear up that porch, according to this, that's my problem. But, who would foresee that somebody's going to have to put gas lines underneath that or something? And I would question why. Now it's my issue, my responsibility to fix the damage you did to my property. So, although my property is on the city property as well. So,
With all due respect, I think they did a pretty nice job on Delaware Street, and most of the work's going to be actually on the street. That's where they're putting the main lines and so forth and so on. But you can't really tell where they connected the main line to the house if there wasn't a meter. So, I don't know.
I think we're talking theoreticals just in case.
Right. I think Mr. Lasko explained it quite well.
And if I may, Madam President, just to piggyback on what Mr. Platt just said, was absolutely, and I don't want to be, a big defender of Delmarva here at this point. However, I will tell you, when there were issues with homeowners that had specific issues, those guys did everything they could to work, as well as work with us and the homeowner in those instances that I'm aware of, let me put it that way, to rectify any problems that they had. And in fact, again, just to even add to that, Delmarva and Henkels received Henkels in particular received quite a lot of positive comments from the way they worked and notified residents. So to Mrs. Leary's point, it is somewhat hypothetical. I get it. We need to be aware of it, but I will say that they kind of went out of their way to work with residents as best they could.
And this is Council President. I don't think anyone would wish to disturb any houses or, anything that they wouldn't have to. I know some of MSC lines, if, they're in the backyards, they're behind fences and behind sheds. And so they have that right to go through, and that probably would be even more disruptive. But I think it's obviously, this sounds like it protects both of us, protects the property owner, and the city should something we don't foresee needed to be done. So at this point, I'm going to ask for a vote. All those in favor of Resolution 2021-13, and it can indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the resolution has passed unanimously. And next, we're going to go to the second reading of ordinance number 532, an ordinance to amend sections 141-6 and 141-19, the city code relating to vacant and dangerous buildings. At this point, I'm going to ask for a motion to dispense with the second reading.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, that's passed unanimously. So we'll go then to a motion and discussion and vote on ordinance number 532, an ordinance to amend sections 141-6 and 141-19, the city code relating to vacant and dangerous buildings. Are there any other comments or questions from council at this point regarding this ordinance? I think we've had very good discussion, and I appreciate Ms. Leary leading this effort, working with Mr. Barthel and Mr. Lasco to improve and tighten up our ordinances related to vacancies and boarded up buildings. So at this point, I'm going to ask for a vote on ordinance 532. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, the ordinance has passed unanimously.
I'd like to thank Mr. Lasco and Mr. Barthel for doing a lot of the legal legwork, all of the legal legwork on this, because that's just, it's above, that legal legwork is very much above my skill set. So I do really appreciate it. And I appreciate the fact that over the last few years, we've decreased the number of vacant homes. I think it originally was around 40 or so, and we're down to around 20. And I just would like to see us be able to continue to decrease that number. And I think this gives our code enforcement and building inspectors a little bit more oomph to get that done. So thank you to everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, so at this point, we're ready for a vote.
You did vote.
We
We did
voted.
Oh, sorry, I'm one off. Thank you for correcting me. Okay, so we're done with that. And at this point, just want to mention that our next meeting is April 13th. So do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor indicate saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, good night.
Good night,
Good
everyone.
Night.